Track 9.
Many people have immigrated to Britain and become citizens over the last 200 years, and in today's lecture I'd like to look at the various laws or Acts of Parliament introduced to deal with those people who came to live in Britain. In 1793 there was the Aliens Act, which the British government introduced to control the number of refugees fleeing to Britain to escape the revolution in France. Compared to today, when refugees have to complete a long and complicated application process before arrival, in 1793, all that was required by the authorities was that individuals had to register at the port where they arrived. The collection of personal information started in 1844 with the Naturalisation Act, which was updated in 1870. The main difference in the 1870 Act was that applicants who wanted to stay in Britain had to have served the Crown or to have lived in the country for at least 5 years before being considered. Both these acts allowed the government to control the number of people coming into the country. These changes were fairly insignificant regarding people's freedoms and the amount of state intervention involved. However, in the 20th century, this began to change. The Alien Registration Act was introduced in 1914, and when the First World War broke out, all aliens over the age of 16 had to register at local police stations, be of good character, and demonstrate a working knowledge of English. The reason for this act was to create a feeling of patriotism among migrant communities and also to stop spies from Europe infiltrating the country. And after the Second World War, the meaning of British nationality was redefined again, this time to encourage residents from British colonies to come to Britain to help rebuild the country. This was the British Nationality Act of 1948. The condition was that potential migrants had to demonstrate that they wanted to work and were fit and healthy. Finally, there was the Commonwealth Immigration Act of 1962. Legislation was passed to restrict the number of Commonwealth immigrants to Britain. Although many people still wanted to come to Britain to obtain good jobs, the Act now meant applicants had to get work permits, which were given mostly to skilled immigrants such as doctors. In the next session, I want to look at more contemporary acts. For instance, the one that was...
Track 3.
Hi there, guys. Nice to see you.
And you. So, are we going to finalise what we're doing for the environmental science presentation today?
I hope so. The presentation is next week.
Actually, I wanted to talk to you about this because I think we need to take out some of the information we're including.
Oh, really? Like what, Shirley?
Well, I'd like to suggest taking out the background details. I think it's just too much information to fit into 10 minutes.
But isn't it important to make sure the audience understands the context?
I don't think so. And anyway, we could include the background details on the handout.
OK, I'm with you on that. Chris, what do you think?
Yes, OK, that's fine. I'll add the details to the handout. Anything else?
Yes. I'm not sure whether the solar energy statistics will be too much for the audience to take in. There's a lot of numbers and graphs. Can we put the statistics on a handout too?
I see your point. We don't want people looking at lots of numbers while we're speaking.
But without the statistics, I don't see how we can support our main ideas.
Actually, you're right, Tom. I hadn't thought about that. In that case, can we delete the diagrams? It's going to take too much time to explain them.
Let's think about that a bit more. If we have to choose between taking out the statistics or the diagrams, I think we should opt for the diagrams. They're less crucial to the presentation. What do you both think?
I think it's going to work much better than the original plan we had.
Absolutely. We won't have to worry about talking for longer than 15 minutes if we remove the diagrams and focus on the main ideas and statistics. Shall we all meet again tomorrow to finalise the details? Track 5. Section 3. You will hear students and a tutor discussing an energy project. First, you will have 20 seconds to look at questions 1 to 7. Now listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 7. Good morning, Phil. Jackie. I hope your project is going well.
Good morning, Mr. Jackson.
Hi, Mr. Jackson. Well, we've made a start on analysing the different forms of renewable energy, but unfortunately, we don't really agree on some points.
Okay, why don't we talk about it?
Well, Jackie believes that all forms of renewable energy are beneficial economically, whereas I doubt that that's true for all of them.
Such as?
Such as wind, wave, and solar energy, because they're less reliable.
That's a valid point, but I don't think that's a large enough factor to disregard it completely.
Exactly. That's what I said.
However, another drawback is that they're generally very expensive to produce.
Yes, you're right, and that is a concern when evaluating their usefulness in future.
I agree with you to a point, but it's likely that the cost will come down. I read a report in the Journal of Environmental Science that estimates the cost would fall by 20% over the next 10 years, which is significant, isn't it?
Absolutely, Jackie. But you need to think about how difficult it is to predict the future cost of non-traditional energy sources before you believe the report. Remember, in your project, I want to see evidence of critical analysis. Make sure you've analyzed all the information rather than just accepting the information that you agree with. Also, it's very important that you demonstrate wide reading around the subject.
I know. It's just that I'm not convinced that it's going to continue to be that expensive, especially if there's a demand from consumers.
Well, what about if we analyze the costing process as part of our project?
That's an excellent idea, Phil. Okay, so let's imagine that we want to forecast the cost of producing solar energy. How could we do that, Jackie?
Well, I think we'd have to start by working out how many hours of daylight there are in the UK per year.
The Meteorological Office would have data on that.
Then estimate the number of hours of sun to get a rough total.
And then I suppose we'd need to work out how much it would cost to supply the average home with solar power, and then extrapolate that to get a number for the whole country.
Good. And don't forget the price of power conversion stations. This will have a significant impact on overall expenditure. And there's one more factor you haven't taken into account yet regarding the consumers.
Whether they would change from traditional to renewable energy?
No, but think about what might make them change.
Oh, yes. How much they would be willing to pay.
Exactly. Well done. Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you will have 20 seconds to look at questions 8 to 10. Track 6. Now listen and answer questions 8 to 10.
So, our project is going to cover 3 main areas. Firstly, comparing the main forms of alternative energy, solar, wind, wave, and biofuels in terms of production costs. Secondly, we'll take solar energy as an example and do a cost prediction. And lastly, we'll analyze whether they're likely to replace traditional fossil fuels in the future.
That sounds like a comprehensive project with a good focus. Now, what data are you going to use and what approach will you use for the analysis?
Now that's something we do agree on. We want to use the reports you gave us in our last lecture and some statistics from the Government, Environment and Energy Department. In terms of analysis, we're going to use a cross-referencing method where we compare each of the government reports with the Robertson report and highlight any differences. Then we'll analyze these to see why the differences exist and where more research needs to be done.
That is the end of section 3. In the exam, you will have half a minute to check your answers.